The murder of 20-year-old Mary Ashford sent shockwaves through the village of Erdington, when her lifeless body was discovered in a flooded sandpit just 5 miles outside of Birmingham, England. Over a century later, on the same day and hour of the Ashford murder, history repeated itself in a most horrific way, when 20-year-old nurse Barbara Forrest was brutally strangled and left in the tall grass near the children's home in Erdington. As investigators delved into the Barbara Forrest murder, they uncovered a series of eerie similarities and parallels with the Ashford case. A police archivist who reviewed the 1817 murder shook his head in disbelief as he noticed the coincidences. Notably, both murders occurred on Whit Monday, which fell on May 26 in both 1817 and 1975, the year of Barbara's death. Both 20-year-old victims had been raped before their murders, and their bodies were discovered within 300 yards of each other. The coincidences continued to mount, as both Mary Ashford and Barbara Forrest shared the same birth date, and even more chillingly, in both cases, a man named Thornton was arrested and charged with murder. On May 27, 1817, a laborer on his way to work in Erdington stumbled upon a heap of blood-stained clothes near Penn's Mill at 6:30 a.m. He immediately notified the police, and during the search of the area, they discovered 2 sets of footprints, one belonging to a man and the other to a woman, leading towards a flooded sandpit. Following the footprints, the police arrived at the edge of the pit, where they discovered the body of a local girl, Mary Ashford. Her body was soaked in blood, and her arms were severely bruised. The police began to investigate, and found that Mary had traveled to Birmingham on Whit Monday, May 26, to sell dairy produce at the market. Later in the evening, she changed into a new dress at her friend Hannah Cox's house, before heading to the Whitsuntide dance at the Tyburn House Inn. At the dance, Mary had spent most of the evening in the company of a young bricklayer named Abraham Thornton, while Hannah had been dancing with a boy named Benjamin Carter. The dance ended around midnight, and the 4 of them headed towards their respective homes, until they reached a spot known as the Old Cuckoo, just a short distance from Erdington village, where Hannah and Benjamin went off in another direction, leaving Mary and Abraham to continue on their way. At 3:30 on the morning of May 27, Mary was spotted walking slowly and alone towards Hannah's mother's home. Later 2 witnesses saw Mary in Bell Lane, with Joseph Dawson seeing her around 4:15 a.m., and Thomas Broadhurst spotting her about 10 minutes later. Both witnesses testified that Mary was alone at the time. She was last seen at Hannah's mother's house, where she changed back into her working clothes and said goodbye to her friend at 4 a.m. As the investigation into Mary's death progressed, the police interviewed Abraham Thornton, who had been seen with Mary at the dance the previous night. Thornton was in a state of shock upon being informed of Mary's murder. At first, he seemed sincere and unaware that he was the prime suspect. However, when he was taken into custody and searched, he realized the gravity of the situation. The detectives interrogated him about every detail of his actions after leaving the Tyburn House Inn with Mary. Thornton admitted to having had sexual intercourse with her, but vehemently denied raping and killing her. Thornton stated in a deposition that he and Mary had walked hand in hand over a field to a stile after their friends had left them. They talked for about 15 minutes, and then went to the green at Erdington, where Mary went into her friend's house to change her dress. Abraham waited for her for some time, but when Mary did not come out, he went home alone. His statement was corroborated by 3 other witnesses, who had seen him at that time. One of them, a gamekeeper named John Hayden, even talked to Thornton for over a quarter of an hour. Despite this, the police investigation hit a wall, as no one had seen Mary and Thornton together after they were last spotted at the stile, at the top of Bell Lane at 3 in the morning. This lack of evidence left the police with a challenging puzzle to solve. Abraham Thornton was brought to trial in August of that year, at the Warwick Assize Court before Mr. Justice Holroyd. Hundreds of people who believed that Thornton had killed Mary Ashford had waited outside the courthouse from 6 in the morning, in the hope of hearing a guilty verdict, but they were disappointed. After only 6 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty. In modern English law, this verdict would have been final. However, an ancient law existed in the early 19th century that allowed Mary Ashford's brother, William, to appeal against the jury's verdict, and demand a second trial. This was done, and on November 17, 1817, Abraham Thornton once again stood in the dock, this time before Lord Ellenborough at the Court of the King's Bench. By now, interest in the Mary Ashford murder had reached fever pitch in every corner of Britain, and the Fleet Street newshounds were delighted at a dramatic turn in the case. Legal history was made, when Lord Ellenborough allowed Thornton to take advantage of an archaic law called trial by battle. There were objections to the trial by battle, but Lord Ellenborough proudly enunciated to the court, "It is the law of England." If Ashford accepted the challenge and won, Thornton would be executed immediately. However, if Thornton won, he would have to be freed, and would no longer have to appear in court in connection with the Ashford murder. During the trial, William Ashford and his legal representative challenged Thornton's entitlement to trial by battle, and rebuked Lord Ellenborough for allowing such a primitive alternative to a proper retrial. However, these objections were ultimately dismissed. As William Ashford failed to respond to Thornton's challenge before April 21 of the following year, Thornton was formally acquitted of Mary Ashford's murder. Nevertheless, due to the negative publicity, Thornton was unable to secure employment as a bricklayer, and eventually relocated to the United States. Exactly 157 years later, on May 27, 1975, Barbara Forrest, a 20-year-old nurse, was found strangled and abandoned in the long grass, near the children's home in Erdington where she worked. Her partially clothed body had been there for over a week, and an autopsy revealed that she had been raped and strangled. Strangely, Barbara's facial features bore an eerie resemblance to those of Mary Ashford, the victim of a similarly brutal murder over a century earlier. The police were investigating the Barbara Forrest murder, when they discovered even more disturbing similarities between the two cases. The day of Mary Ashford's murder, Whit Monday, was on May 26, 1817, and the same was true for the year of Barbara Forrest's murder. Perhaps even more baffling is the fact that both murders occurred around the same time of day, and both victims had visited a friend's house to change into a new dress, before attending a Whit Monday dance. But the coincidences do not end there. Following the discovery of Barbara's body, the police began to investigate, and soon arrested Michael Thornton, a fellow child care officer who worked at the same home as Barbara. Like Abraham Thornton, who had been accused of Mary Ashford's murder in 1817, Michael Thornton was put on trial for the murder of Barbara Forrest. However, just like his historical counterpart, Michael Thornton was ultimately acquitted. The coincidence was eerie, to say the least. Days before each victim was killed, they made ominous remarks that seemed to foreshadow their fate. Mary had told her friend Hannah's mother that she had bad feelings about the week to come. Barbara, on the other hand, confided in a colleague at work that she had a strange premonition that this is going to be my unlucky month. I just know it. Don't ask me why. Despite numerous attempts by criminologists, the identity of Mary and Barbara's killer remains a mystery, and the similarities between these two cases continue to intrigue and confound investigators to this day.